Need to check the names file carefully before writing. The names to avoid are all listed in the document. I'll create completely new names not in that list. The morning I found the text message, I was standing at the kitchen counter in my bathrobe, waiting for the coffee to finish brewing. It was the kind of quiet that only comes at 6 in the morning in November, when the trees outside have already given up their leaves and everything just looks tired and bare. I had my phone in my hand because I'd been checking the weather. We were supposed to get frost that night, and I still had a pot of chrysanthemums on the back porch I hadn't brought in yet. That's when I saw it. A text from my son's wife, sent at 11:47 the night before. I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the counter and just stood there, listening to the coffee drip. We've decided we're not doing Christmas with you this year. Please don't make this into something dramatic. You always make everything about you. Honestly, Audrey, it would just be easier for everyone if you stayed home. She'd called me Audrey. Not Mom. Not even Mrs. Calloway. Audrey. Like I was someone she'd just met at a PTA meeting she didn't want to be at. I picked up my phone again and read it one more time, hoping I'd misread something, that there was a softness somewhere in those words I'd missed the first 2 times. There wasn't. I poured my coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where my husband Gerald and I had eaten 31 years of breakfasts, and I let myself cry. Not the quiet, dignified kind of crying, the ugly kind where you have to press a dish towel against your face because you don't want the neighbors to somehow hear you through the walls. When I was done, I took a breath. Then I took a picture of the text with my phone because some part of me already knew I'd need proof of this moment later, that I'd need to look back at it and remind myself that I hadn't imagined it, that it had been real. Gerald passed away 4 years ago, heart attack, completely without warning, on a Tuesday morning in March. He'd been getting ready for a dentist appointment. He was 63 years old and had never been seriously ill a day in his life. And then one Tuesday in March, he was just gone. We had 1 child together, our son, Daniel. He was 31 when his father died, already living across town with his wife, Melissa. No, I won't use her real name. I'll call her what she's always made me feel like, an inconvenience. I'll call her Iris. That sounds pretty enough, doesn't it? Pretty and a little cold, which is fitting. Daniel and I were close once. I want to make sure I say that clearly because I think when people hear stories like this one, they assume there must have been distance all along. There wasn't. When Daniel was a teenager, he used to come sit on the edge of my bed on Sunday mornings and just talk about his week, about his friends, about whatever music he was listening to. He cried on my shoulder when his first serious girlfriend broke up with him. He called me from college whenever things got hard. I thought I knew my son. Then he married Iris, and I started to notice that every time things got hard, really hard, he made a choice. And the choice was never me. It started small, the way these things always do. Missed calls that went days without being returned. Holiday plans that got changed at the last minute, always with a reason that made perfect sense on the surface. Her family's in from out of town. We already made other plans. Maybe next year. I told myself it was normal, that this is what happens when your child builds a life with someone else, that I needed to give them space. I told myself this for years. Then Gerald died. And in the weeks after the funeral, when the casseroles stopped coming and the sympathy cards stopped arriving and the house got very, very quiet, Daniel came to me with the situation. He and Iris had bought more house than they could comfortably afford. The mortgage, the car payments, the credit card debt they'd accumulated, furnishing the place. It had all caught up with them, and they were having trouble staying current on everything. He sat across from me at that kitchen table and explained it in the careful, organized way he'd always had, like he was presenting a proposal. He needed help. He was asking if I could contribute something monthly, just until they got their footing. I said yes. Of course I said yes. Gerald had left me in a solid position. The house was paid off. I had my retirement. I had some savings. I wasn't wealthy, but I was comfortable. And this was my son. He was struggling. What was I supposed to say? We agreed on $800 a month. I set up the transfer through my bank so it went automatically on the first of every month because I didn't want Daniel to have to ask me for it each time. I didn't want him to feel like he was constantly coming to me with his hand out. I wanted it to feel like what it was, a mother helping her family. That was 3 years before the text message. In those 3 years, the 800 became 1,000, then 1,250 when they had my granddaughter, Poppy. And before you ask, yes, I know. I know now what it looks like from the outside. But when you're in it, when someone you love tells you that things are tight and you have the means to help, it doesn't feel like enabling. It feels like love. It just feels like love. Poppy was born 18 months before the text message. She had Daniel's eyes and Gerald's gap-toothed smile, and she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. I drove to the hospital the morning she arrived, and I held her in the hallway outside the room because Iris's mother was inside and there wasn't enough space. And I told myself that was fine, that I'd have so many chances, that this was just the beginning. Those chances turned out to be rationed in ways I didn't immediately understand. I was allowed over on Saturday mornings for about 2 hours, as long as I gave notice the day before. I was not to drop by unannounced ever. I was not to post photos of Poppy on social media without clearing it with Iris first. I was not to offer opinions about feeding schedules, sleep training, or any other parenting decision unless directly asked. I followed every single rule. I followed them even when it hurt. Even the Saturday Iris told me at the door that Poppy was napping and I should probably just come back another time. And I drove home and sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside. I never said a word. The mortgage payments continued on the first of every month. November came, and I'd been thinking about Christmas for weeks. It would be Poppy's second Christmas. She was old enough now to understand some of it. The lights, the wrapping paper, the excitement. I had bought her gifts. I'd been hiding in my bedroom closet since September. A wooden train set that Gerald would have loved to put together with her. A set of storybooks. A little knitted bear from a shop downtown. I texted Daniel in early November to ask about the plans, whether they'd be coming to my house for Christmas morning or if I should plan to come to them, or if we'd do something in between. A simple question. A question any grandmother would ask. He didn't answer. 4 days later, I followed up, just checking on the Christmas question when you get a chance. The response came at 11:47 at night from Iris's number, not Daniel's. You know what it said. I sat with it for 3 days. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't respond to Iris. I just sat with it and tried to figure out what I actually felt, under the hurt and the shock, at the very bottom of everything. What I felt was something I hadn't expected. Clarity. I thought about my own mother. She'd passed when I was in my early 40s, and I would give almost anything to have one more Saturday morning with her. To sit in her kitchen and drink bad coffee and let her talk too long about the neighbors. I would give anything. I thought about Gerald, what he would say if he were sitting across from me at the kitchen table right now. Gerald was a quiet man, patient to a fault. But there was a line with him. A point past which he would get very still and very calm, and you knew that something was about to change. I thought he would have gotten very still. I called my bank on a Thursday morning. I had a conversation with a woman there who was incredibly kind and asked no questions at all, which I appreciated. And then I canceled the automatic transfer, the one that had been going out on the first of every month for 3 years. No warning, no phone call to Daniel. No long letter explaining myself. I just stopped. I want to be honest about how I felt in the days that followed, because it wasn't entirely peaceful. There were moments when I second-guessed myself, lying awake at 3 in the morning wondering if this was cruel, if I was punishing my son for something his wife had done, if I was letting pride make a decision I'd regret. I thought about Poppy. I thought about whether cutting off that support would create hardship that somehow found its way to her. That part was hard. But I also kept coming back to the same thought. They didn't want me at Christmas. They didn't want me in their lives. Not really. Not as a person who mattered, who had a seat at the table, who got to be present for her granddaughter's second Christmas morning. They wanted the $12.50 on the first of the month. Those two things could not continue to coexist. I couldn't keep quietly subsidizing a life I was being quietly erased from. December 1st came and went. On December 3rd, Daniel called. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was careful and measured, the way he always is, saying that there seemed to be a problem with the bank transfer and could I look into it. I didn't call back. On December 5th, Iris called. That one I also let go to voicemail. Her message was less careful. She said there must have been some kind of error and they needed me to fix it and they had bills due and could I please handle this. I didn't call back. On December 7th, my doorbell rang at 8:15 in the morning. I was in the kitchen again. Same bathrobe, same coffee, different morning. I looked through the window by the front door before I opened it, because I somehow already knew. It was Daniel. He was alone. No Iris, no Poppy. He was standing on my porch with his hands in his jacket pockets, and he looked tired. He looked like he hadn't slept much, which I recognized because I recognized the way exhaustion sits on his face from all the years I'd watched him grow up. I opened the door. We stood there looking at each other for a moment. "Mom," he said, "can I come in?" I stepped back and let him in. I poured him a cup of coffee without asking because that's what you do, and we sat down at the kitchen table together. He explained, first, the practical situation. The transfer not going through. The bills. The credit card payment that had been depending on that money. He explained it in that organized, proposal-style way of his, and when he was done, he looked at me and waited. I waited too. He said, "Mom, are you going to start sending it again?" I said, "Daniel, did you know about the text message Iris sent me?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said yes. He said he had known. I asked him why he hadn't said anything, why he hadn't called me, why, when his wife had sent his mother a text message telling her not to bother coming for Christmas, he hadn't picked up the phone. He didn't have a good answer. He said he thought it would blow over. He said he hadn't wanted to get in the middle of it. He said things had been tense, and he was trying to manage a lot of things at once. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "You've been in the middle of it for years, honey. Whether you acknowledged it or not, you were in the middle of it every month when that money landed in your account. I just need you to understand that." He put his face in his hands. I'm not a person who enjoys watching my child suffer. I want to be very clear about that, watching him sit at that table with his face in his hands. At the same table where he'd sat as a little boy and eaten cereal before school, where he'd done homework, where he'd sat the night his father died and we'd held each other in the dark. That was not a victory for me. It was one of the hardest things I'd done in a long time. But I also didn't reach across the table and say it was okay, because it wasn't yet. I told him that I loved him, that was never in question, that I would love him and Poppy until I took my last breath. And nothing Iris sent in a text message at midnight could change that. I told him that the money was not coming back, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I needed him to understand something that I should have made clearer years ago. Love isn't a transaction. I had been contributing to their household for 3 years because I loved him, not because it was owed. And the moment that support became something they expected to receive while simultaneously deciding I wasn't worth a Christmas invitation, that was the moment it had to stop. I told him that what I wanted, what I'd always wanted, was simple. I wanted to be part of their life. Poppy's life. Not the ATM in the background. Not the grandmother who had to schedule 2-hour visits a week in advance. A real part, he cried. Not a little. He sat at my kitchen table and cried in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager, and I got up and put my arms around him from behind, the way I used to when he was small, and I just held on. I don't know what happened between him and Iris after that morning. I know that 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from Daniel asking if I'd like to come over on the 23rd to help decorate their tree. I said yes. Iris was polite. More than polite, actually. There were moments when she was almost warm, which was strange and a little uncomfortable. like wearing shoes that almost fit. We were careful around each other. We probably will be careful around each other for a long time. I don't expect we'll ever be close, and I've made my peace with that. But I was there when Poppy came downstairs in her pajamas and saw the lights on the tree. I was there when she found the wooden train set under the tree. I'd held onto it and looked up at me with those eyes that are so much her father's eyes, so much Gerald's eyes, and said, "Grandma, look." I looked. I think about Gerald a lot in moments like that, whether he sees them somehow, the way people like to believe. Whether he was in that room with us, watching his granddaughter discover the train set he would have spent an entire afternoon putting together with her. I choose to believe he was. I'm 64 years old, and I've learned some things the slow way, the way you learn things when no one warns you, and you have to figure them out yourself. I've learned that being someone's mother doesn't mean accepting whatever they hand you. I've learned that generosity and self-erasure are not the same thing, even when they look the same from the outside. I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop. And I've learned that a kitchen table holds more than breakfast. It holds the whole history of a family, the fights and the forgiveness, the coffee that gets cold while you're talking about something important, the 8-year-old doing math homework, the man who won't be back. And some mornings, if you're lucky, if you made the hard choices and stayed honest and kept the door open, it holds your son with his face in his hands, finally hearing what you needed him to hear. That's enough for me. It really is. I've thought a lot about what I would tell a younger version of myself if I could. Not the 25-year-old version. She wouldn't listen anyway. I mean the 50-something version, the one who was already starting to feel the slow drift, who already sensed that something was off but kept finding reasonable explanations for it. I'd tell her this: the moment you start making yourself smaller so someone else is more comfortable, pay attention. That's not love you're showing. That's fear dressed up as love, and there's a difference. What happened with Daniel and Iris didn't happen overnight. That's the thing about these situations that nobody warns you about. There's no single moment where everything breaks. It's 100 small moments, each one reasonable enough on its own, until one day you're standing in your kitchen reading a text message that tells you not to come for Christmas, and you realize the drift has been going on for years. I contributed to it. I have to be honest about that. Every month when I set up that automatic transfer, I was telling Daniel without words that my place in his life had a price, and I was willing to pay it. I didn't mean it that way, but that is what I was saying. And people hear what you say, not what you mean. The hardest thing I've ever had to sit with is the understanding that generosity, when it's unexamined, can quietly become a cage. Not for the person receiving it, for you. I had caged myself into a version of motherhood that required me to keep giving, regardless of what came back, and I'd called it unconditional love. It wasn't. Unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional silence about how you're being treated. Those are two completely different things. When I canceled that bank transfer, I wasn't punishing Daniel. I want to be clear about that, even now. I was making the only honest move left to me. I was saying, I see what's happening here, and I'm no longer going to pretend I don't. That's not cruelty. That's self-respect. And self-respect, I've come to believe, is something you have to demonstrate, not just feel quietly on the inside where nobody can see it. Daniel sitting at my kitchen table that December morning, finally listening, finally really hearing me. That didn't happen because I stayed patient. It happened because I stopped. There are times when stopping is the most powerful thing you can do. Not storming off, not delivering ultimatums, not writing long letters explaining every grievance. Just quietly, clearly, stopping. I think about Poppy most of all. She's going to grow up watching her father and her grandmother navigate something that was broken and put back together imperfectly. I hope what she takes from that is not the break, but the repair. I hope she sees that the people who love you are allowed to have limits, that having limits doesn't make you less loving, that the people worth keeping in your life are the ones who, when you finally say enough, sit down and listen instead of walking away. I'm 64 years old. I've made my share of mistakes and I'll probably make more, but I know this much. A kitchen table can hold a whole lot of history if you let it. And some mornings, the most important thing you can do is just keep the coffee on and the door open and trust that the people who matter will find their way back.